No DQ Galaxy. We are live with a recap of AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling's Forbidden Door 2 pay-per-view event. Quite the show, a long show as is the norm for AEW events. Shout out to everybody watching this live. Much appreciation and love to you all. Now, let's get right into this because there is a lot to talk about. It is Monday. It is Monday morning past midnight, so we are going to get right into it. I'm not going to say much about the 0 hour. I don't think 4 matches on the kickoff is necessary. I'm very happy that WWE pretty much did away with the kickoff matches. I just don't think they're necessary. I'm fine with just doing the video packages and the panels of people talking about the matches. The only real noteworthy thing was that you had a women's match in the Owen Hart tournament. Athena won. She should really be on Dynamite and Collision, but they have her in Ring of Honor for whatever reason. I don't know. Anyways, she won. She advances, and I suppose that means she will get on Dynamite or Collision in the future. We had our first match of the evening, which was MJF defending the AEW World title against Hiroshi Tanahashi. Yes, the AEW World title on the line in the opening match of the evening. I love MJF, but this match, I hate to say it, an AEW World title match with MJF, I do not think this match was necessary on this show. They could have done a 3-hour main card pay-per-view without this match. It was not needed. I would have been fine if MJF just said, no, I'm not doing it, and there was no match. It really wasn't needed. It was just to get the AEW World Champion on the show, but AEW Championship match, curtain jerking the show. Now, I guess you look at it from the Brock Lesnar perspective. Brock Lesnar would say that if he's not the main event, he wants to go out there first and leave the building, which is basically how this went down. MJF had his robe that said New Japan Pro Wrestling is an indie. I liked that. And he had Ace's ass written on his elbow pad. The usual MJF match where he would stall and he tried to leave. He wasn't going to do the match. Tanahashi got the crowd to chant coward at MJF. MJF was trash talking during the match, calling Tanahashi a joke. MJF hurt his knee at one point during the match, and that gave Tanahashi the opportunity to make a comeback. MJF started using his heel tactics. He grabbed the AEW World Championship, wanted to use it, but the referee took it away. Tanahashi rolled up MJF, but the referee was trying to get rid of the title, and Tanahashi perhaps had the match won. Referee got back in, but then while the referee was distracted again, MJF used the Dynamite Diamond Ring and scored the 1-2-3 over Tanahashi. Dare I say, it was a good match, but weakest MJF pay-per-view match to date, in my opinion. It was good, but they basically were going out there, having the opening match, not trying to steal the thunder from the rest of the matches. And it was what it was. It was fine. But me personally, I don't think this match was needed on the card. Building Nexus sent in a $5 super chat. Thank you for that. Much appreciation. Says, if they do Punk and MJF, could Punk screw MJF if they don't want the title involved? I would rather see the title on the line because Punk never lost it. It makes sense for Punk to go after the title. Why would he cost MJF the title? He should be challenging for the title. And they did confirm All Out will be in Chicago at the United Center. My gut feeling is MJF will defend against CM Punk at All Out in Chicago. United Center, you want to sell it out. I think you have to have CM Punk going for the title, but we'll see what they do. We had CM Punk, speaking of him, going up against Satoshi Kojima. I think I got that right. This was the men's Owen Hart Tournament first round match. Crowd hated CM Punk even more than they did on Collision. He got booed out of the building. And anytime the CM Punk fans tried to get a CM Punk chant going, the haters just drowned him out of the building. Toronto was definitely Bizarro World on this occasion. And I do agree with Matthew. It's interesting how not only will All Out be in Chicago, but also Dynamite, Rampage at the Now Arena, and Collision will be at the United Center again. That's a lot. They're really trying to see how many dollars they can get out of Chicago, but that could backfire as far as attendance goes. We'll see. That's a lot. 3 different shows, Dynamite / Rampage, Collision, and All Out, all in Chicago that same week. Chicago is considered to be one of the great wrestling towns, but just how much money are they willing to spend on AEW? Time will tell. And yes, CM Punk basically with the John Cena reaction when John Cena was in Toronto against Edge. But once again, CM Punk totally playing it up. He did the Hulk Hogan ear cup again. He delivered the leg drop to Kojima. I love that. CM Punk worked over Kojima, basically being the heel in this match. Kojima fought back, did some of those machine gun chops to Punk. Came off the top with a top rope elbow. Punk kicked out of that. And then Punk did his own elbow, the Macho Man Randy Savage style elbow off the top. Kojima kicked out. Kojima managed to break out of the Anaconda Vice. He avoided the GTS, went for the lariat, but Punk avoided it, hit the GTS, and scored the 1-2-3 victory. No surprise here. I think we all pretty much expected CM Punk to retain his, well, not his championship, but retain his singles undefeated streak. Although he really doesn't have one. Well, I guess he does. He lost to Moxley and then won the title. But anyways, CM Punk keeping his momentum going, I think is what I was going for. Match was fine. I mean, CM Punk was very entertaining, and the crowd reactions made it fun to watch. And I think, yeah, Kojima kind of hit CM Punk low with that elbow drop. We had Orange Cassidy defending the International Championship against Zack Sabre Jr., Shibata, and Daniel Garcia, who's the sports entertainer that doesn't really act very much like an entertainer. Like, if he's going to be a sports entertainer, he needs some Elton John-like glasses and some colorful clothing. Like, Chris Jericho, you got to do a better job of making Daniel Garcia a sports entertainer. You got to have him going out there and being way over the top. Like, he doesn't scream sports entertainer to me just because you call him that. Anyways, this was a 4-way match, which meant it was no DQ. I'm always a fan of that. Orange Cassidy did the kicks to the 3 other guys, and they all tried applying submissions to Cassidy. Each submission was broken up. They all hit each other with a big boot at the same time. Then they all took turns giving each other suplexes. It was very choreographed, everything in this match, but it was fun. Garcia used the international title on Shibata since it was, in fact, a no DQ match. And yeah, I was totally wrong about CM Punk's singles streak. I was just having a brain fart. Orange Cassidy, Shibata, They traded strikes back and forth. Crowd was chanting, "You're a wrestler," at Daniel Garcia. Well, he is. Doesn't even act like a sports entertainer as far as I'm concerned. Cassidy delivered the beach break to Shibata, but Shibata kicked out. Zack, I can't even pronounce his name. Zack Sabre Jr. came back in, targeted the hand of Orange Cassidy. Orange heard it doing the orange punch earlier in the match. And then Shibata was on the verge of winning, but then Cassidy came in, threw out Shibata, and or was it Garcia? He threw out Shibata and pinned Garcia to retain the championship. No surprise here for me. I definitely figured that Orange Cassidy would retain. He's the master at retaining in these multi-way matches. Did not see a need for him to lose here. So yeah, sure enough, Orange Cassidy does overcome the odds again. And I think he's had like 25 title defenses at this point. He is the workhorse of AEW at this point. Good match here. I enjoyed it. We had Sanada versus Jungle Boy Jack Perry for the IWGP Championship. Now, going in, I really did not care about this match. There just wasn't really solid build for it. I mean, the only build was both guys acting like the other guy isn't worthy of being an opponent. Jungle Boy not knowing who Sanada was or seeing any of his matches, and Sanada saying Jungle Boy is not a worthy contender for the title. This was their build-up, and it was a good match, but to me, it never really felt like a world title match. Perry tried to finish off Sanada with the snare trap early, and it went back and forth for a while. Sanada was absorbing all of Perry's chops, and it went back and forth. They did the thing where they traded the strikes. Sanada did pick up the win with a moonsault. Felt very abrupt for me. Yeah, did not really feel like a world title match. It was good, but felt like a TV match, basically. Now, after the match was over, we had the most noteworthy thing about this. Hook helped Jungle Boy up the stage, but then Jungle Boy snapped. He attacked his buddy Hook. Jungle Hook is no more. Jack Perry officially turning heel. He started mocking his own entrance and Jungle Boy taunt when he comes out to the music. Jungle Boy is a heel. This might be a tough sell, and I'll tell you why. Now, I thought Sami Zayn being a heel was a tough sell, and he pulled it off brilliantly. So we'll see what Jungle Boy can do. But to be a great heel, I think, number one, you either need to have the size to be intimidating, or number two, you need to be a great talker. Sami Zayn, great talker. He could pull it off as a heel. The Miz, he's not the biggest guy, but he's a great talker. MJF's not the biggest guy, but he's a hell of a talker. Jungle Boy, like maybe this heel turn will bring something out in him that we haven't seen yet. But I'm skeptical because Jungle Boy is a high flyer, good-looking guy. Not sure how he's going to work out as a heel. And Steve says maybe Jungle Boy goes back with Christian and Luchasaurus. Like, we'll see. It's an ambitious move, but maybe it's something that Jungle Boy needs. They did tease it at Double or Nothing where Jungle Boy could have won by cheating, but he chose not to. We had the Blackpool Combat Club going up against the Elite 10-man tag team match. This was a really fun match, as you would expect from these guys. Lots of action, back and forth. And the storyline in this was mainly built around Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley. They tagged in, and the crowd gave them a standing ovation. They were really hyped about seeing these these friends going at it, and they did. They were chopping each other. The Elite did their dives. Adam Page did his moonsault off the top to the outside, and back in the ring, Moxley and Eddie Kingston were still going at it with the chops. And then Claudio took a cheap shot. Eddie really wanted to get his hands on Claudio, but Claudio avoided him. And then the Elite started to build up some momentum. Takeshita, though, was quite the beast in this match. He looked really good. He gave both Bucks a German suplex at the same time, but then they started to make a comeback. Super kick party to everybody. They went for a super kick to Moxley, but Kingston pushed Moxley out of the way, even though they were opponents in this match, and he took the blow. And later in the match, Moxley just gave Kingston a cutter despite the save earlier. So Moxley did not give a damn about Kingston taking the blow for him. Match went back and forth. Crowd was chanting "Fight Forever." Ishii eventually pinned Yuta with the Brainbuster, and I think this was the only match I got wrong. I think I predicted the Blackpool Combat Club to win, but they lost this one. Elite wins despite the whole issue earlier with Kingston taking the super kicks. But Kingston did argue with the Elite afterwards despite the victory. Where does this go from here? Well, as I mentioned in previous streams, I definitely think that Blood and Guts match is coming. And it's rumored now that it might happen as soon as Dynamite in Boston coming up in a few weeks, which would explain why they're booking that Dynamite at the main arena in Boston and not the smaller arena that they usually do because of Blood and Guts, and they want to try and draw the bigger crowd. I still think they should save it, but maybe they got something big planned for All In and All Out. More on that in a few moments here. Next up, we had the AEW Women's Championship match, which did not need to be on the card, but they got to have a women's match on the card or else people would be upset. So it is what it is. You had the Outcasts out there, and they did their usual interference, getting involved. I mean, Willow tried to take them all on. She was attacking Saraya and Ruby Soho, but then Toni Storm took advantage. You know, you got to focus on your opponent. And you got to have some friends. Like, does Willow Nightingale, where was like Hikaru Shida or Riho or any of them that have been dealing with the Outcast? I don't understand like how the baby faces don't have any friends on some of these occasions. And in this case, Willow's got no friends. Toni worked over Willow for several minutes, but then Willow made her big comeback, dropped Toni on the apron with a Death Valley driver, hit another one in the ring, but Toni kicked out. The Outcasts tried to cheat, rolled a can of spray paint in the ring. Referee saw it, kicked them out of the ringside area. Willow kept fighting. She was on the verge of winning, but then Toni pulled the referee in front of her and then gouged the eyes of Willow and picked up the win with the Storm Zero. Match was decent, but yeah, I still question the logic here, like Willow not having any friends to counteract the Outcasts. It seems to be an ongoing pattern here with the interference. And the match was solid, but I mean, could not really stand out to some of the other matches on the card compared to some of the matches on the card. And now, speaking of not being able to stand up to other matches on the card, we had Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay for the IWGP United States Championship. This match was something else. Went about 40 minutes, almost 40 minutes. Ospreay had a big entrance, a protest video before he came out there. He had Don Callis and security. The crowd erupted when the bell rang. They chanted, "Holy shit." And you knew this match was going long. Anytime they start off slow, they do the feeling out process. You know you're in for a long match. They were countering each other. Crowd gave them a standing ovation. They were chanting, "This is wrestling." And then Don Callis started getting involved, and this is when they should start chanting, "This is sports entertainment," when you have the shenanigans on the outside. Callis grabbed the foot of Omega and hid behind the security, but the referee saw everything that was happening, and he kicked Don Callis out of the ringside area. And that means 100% we're not seeing Don Callis again, right? More on that in a moment here, or a few moments, because like I said, this was a very long match. We had Ospreay getting the upper hand for a while, and he was doing some cool stuff. You know, Omega was hanging on to the ropes, and Ospreay came off the top with a shooting star press onto Omega. It looked really cool, although you have to check your brain at the door because you got Omega clearly grabbing on the rope to make sure he doesn't lose his balance, so Ospreay can do his move. Kind of defies logic, but it looked really cool. I mean, it's definitely something you would see in a video game. And Ospreay hit Omega with the Os cutter on the apron, drove Omega's head into the announce table repeatedly. Omega got busted open, and then Ospreay took a page out of the Shawn Michaels playbook. He grabbed a Canadian flag. He started wiping his crotch with it. He put the flag in his nose, which is what Shawn Michaels did back in 1997 when he was feuding with Bret Hart. Great stuff here. I love the tribute to Shawn Michaels. And Omega took advantage of this, though. Omega started with the offense, and they were back on the outside. And this time it was Ospreay who got busted open. Omega gave Ospreay a DDT on the steel steps. They got back in the ring. Ospreay hit a Spanish fly. Omega kicked out of that. Ospreay, once again, playing off 1997, applied the sharpshooter in Toronto and the crossface, the crippler crossface. He was going all out here to get the heat, and Omega was able to get to the rope. Omega made a comeback, hit several big moves, spiked pile driver, could not finish off Ospreay. Ospreay regained the upper hand, came off the top with what they call a sky twister press, a crazy move to the outside of the ring on Omega. Then Omega kicked out after an Os cutter. And at this point, Don Callis returned. Despite being kicked out by the referee, he was back, and he gave Ospreay a screwdriver while the referee was distracted. Ospreay hit Omega with it, then hit the Stormbreaker, but Omega just barely managed to get his foot on the rope. Ospreay hit the one-winged angel on Omega, which, you know what I always say, anytime the heel goes for his opponent's finisher, it backfires. And he did hit the move, but it just made Omega so angry that Omega actually kicked out at one, and the place just erupted for this. Went absolutely nuts. Omega had a third or fourth wind at this point. They traded shots. Omega got the upper hand, but Ospreay avoided the one-winged angel and hit a Tiger Driver 91. Omega kicked out of that, and then Ospreay finally managed to finish off Omega with a Stormbreaker, center of the ring, 1, 2, 3. Great match here. Was it match of the year? I think it's definitely a contender, but I still think I would prefer MJF and Danielson over this. It was an excellent match, though. Great stuff here from these guys. The whole thing with Don Callis was a bit over the top, with him coming out there despite being kicked out. But I thought they did a really great job with the pacing, and the moves they did, I felt were meaningful. And fantastic match. I mean, definitely a contender. I don't know if I would go with it for match of the year, but it was pretty epic for sure. And in my opinion, spoiler alert, match of the night. Nirvana fan 09 with a $2 super chat. Thank you for that. Says, Omega took a lot of the pile driver on top of the head. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. It was brutal. These guys, they really did go all out here to try and put on the best match possible. So you have to give them credit for their efforts in this one. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. Much appreciated. And yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of Will Ospreay, but he really impressed me in this one. Like he really showed that he belongs on the big stage. Moving on, we had our buffer match, which involved Chris Jericho and Sting. Imagine that. The buffer match of the evening between the two big matches that people were buying the pay-per-view to see involved Chris Jericho and Sting. You could tell the crowd was getting tired at this point, but you got the old star power with Sting in there, Chris Jericho in there. Sting had kind of Joker face paint. First time, I think, since Impact Wrestling that he had the semblance of Joker face paint. And Sting tagged in pretty early on. Jericho begged to be tagged in. He came in, but then Suzuki and Jericho were double teaming Sting. Eventually, we got to Sting and Jericho one-on-one going at it. Sting, Jericho went for a Stinger Splash, but missed. Sting applied the Scorpion Deathlock, and then Sammy Guevara came off the top with a cutter, and I was legit terrified because I thought Sammy Guevara broke his neck. Like Sting got dropped on his head, and I'm just thinking Seth Rollins flashback 2015 when Sting had that injury that ended his career for several years. It was really scary. And fortunately, it looked like Sting recovered and was okay. He got through the rest of the match, but I was legit terrified during this one. And things broke down. I mean, Sting continued. I mean, they set up a table. Jericho pulled out a table, laid Sting on it, and this was a rare occurrence where the guy that set up the table did not go through the table. Sammy Guevara was ordered by Jericho to put Sting through the table. So Guevara came off the top with a 630 splash, and Sting was put through the table. Now, somehow, 30 seconds later, Sting was back in the match. Sammy might have been the one that got hurt from the table spot because Sting was back in there and Sammy was nowhere to be seen. Things broke down, and with Sting's help, Sting was still in this. After all that, Sting was still in it, and Naito, with Sting's help, was able to pin Suzuki. And the crowd also liked earlier in the match when Suzuki and Sting were going at it. Jericho attacked Naito with the bat after the match, and Sting made the save and chased Jericho away. I wonder if they're going to do Sting versus Jericho at Allin as Sting's retirement match. I could definitely see that as a possibility. And, I think Sting was okay when he was not being nearly killed by Sammy Guevara. And if they do have a match, I think they got to try and keep it pretty short and not try to do so many crazy things. But yeah, this was entertaining for what it was. But yeah, it was the buffer match between Omega and Ospreay in the main event, which was Bryan Danielson versus Okada. First time ever. Bryan Danielson had his old pre-WWE indie music, The Final Countdown by Europe. I guess recently the rights were sold, which opened the door for the music to be licensed. And I think it's a big improvement over the music he's been using. I was never really a fan of that music. I'm glad Bryan got The Final Countdown again. Okada came out there, had the rain with the money coming down. Crowd chanted, "Holy shit, this is awesome." Right when the bell rang, just like Bryan's match with Omega from 2021 on Dynamite, the Grand Slam. This was a really good match, but there were a few issues. First of all, the crowd was just tired. You could tell they really wanted to love this match. They wanted to go crazy for it, but you could tell the audience was feeling fatigued, as was I. And whenever you try to do like a mat-based match at the end, especially on a long show, it's tough. It's tough to get people invested. Like if you have a match where guys are doing high spots and all these crazy things, like you can get them invested. But it's even tougher when you have a long show and you had guys in the previous matches doing all of these crazy things. So it was tough to get the crowd into it, but they were definitely invested, just not at the level that you might hope for. And I don't think they were at the level that they were for Ospreay's match with Omega. Like that match, I think the fans just basically let all their energy out, and they were really struggling to make noise for these last two matches here. And obviously the Sting match was buffer, filler, whatever. So anyways, they were doing the mat wrestling. Crowd was chanting, "You're going to get your effing head kicked in." They were doing the yes chants. They fought on the outside several times. And Okada sent Bryan over the barricade, came over the top with a crossbody onto Bryan into the crowd. He continued his offense. Bryan fought back, though, and then they were on the outside again. Okada gave Bryan a tombstone pile driver on the ramp, and the crowd really liked that. Back in the ring, Okada delivered a flying elbow. He was going to hit the Rainmaker, but then Bryan started convulsing. He did a great job here because it looked like maybe he was really hurt. And you had the trainer coming in, but of course it was just all a setup. He was feigning it. Bryan took advantage. Great heel tactic here. And he hit Okada with the running knee. He hit a second one, but Okada kicked out. And Okada fought back. Okada finally, after multiple attempts, he hit the Rainmaker. But Bryan kicked out of the Rainmaker. And then Bryan, who had targeted the arm and shoulder earlier in the match, applied this arm submission and working over the arm and shoulder. And basically out of nowhere, Okada tapped out. And I don't think people were expecting this. I certainly wasn't expecting this finish, nor was I expecting this to be the finish of the match. It just seemed to come out of nowhere. I actually thought it felt a little anticlimactic. I'm definitely surprised that Bryan won, considering he's kind of in this position in his career where he's putting over other people at this point. So yeah, I did not expect this finish, and the ending I thought felt a little flat. But yeah, it was a great match overall. I still don't think it was at the level of Ospreay and Okada. I think that was the best match, and I get why they put this at the end because it was the dream match and everything the first time. But yeah, I wonder. I mean, Bryan's a heel, so the heel won at the end. You could have had Ospreay win as the heel at the end. Yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting end to the show. Steve sent in a $2 super chat, but he did not leave a comment. Thank you for that, Steve. Much appreciated. Although he did say, been a while since he's been on live, just wanted to send some support. I very much appreciate it, Steve. Thank you for tuning in. And I do not know if Okada ever tapped out. I do not recall it. See, it wasn't even like the Undertaker streak ending, because when that happened, like everybody was just in shock. I think people were surprised, but like it didn't have that kind of vibe for me. Maybe if I was following Okada's career closely, I would have cared more. But yeah, I was just a little surprised. I'm like, that's the end. Overall, Forbidden Door was a great show. My usual criticism would be that it's too long. I think these shows should be 3 hours tops and no kickoff. Just a 3-hour show. I mean, really, you only needed like 6 or 7 matches. The Okada match and the Ospreay match, like those matches were selling the show. Everything else is like just icing on the cake, but you did not need 10 matches on this show. Dwayne Atkinson sent in a $2 super chat, says, will there be a rematch at Wrestle Kingdom? I think they're doing it at All In. If they're doing Blood and Guts on Dynamite in Boston, I think they're doing one more Ospreay and Omega match. I think they're doing that, although I think you're talking about the Danielson match. Yeah, you might be right on that. They might do that in Japan. I could definitely see that as a possibility. And Building Nexus sent in a $2 super chat. Says, could Ospreay and Omega have a 2 out of 3 falls match? Yeah, I definitely think they're doing that third match. That match will probably be at All In if I had to make a prediction, and Ospreay will be the babyface there. And yeah, I could see them doing Bryan and Okada in a rematch in Japan. I know Bryan's been wanting to go to Japan for a while now, and maybe that was the thought process here. Bryan should win this match in the United States, or not the United States, in Canada. I mean, Toronto, Canada, practically, it's North America. That's what I meant, North America, not the United States. Yeah, they could do the rematch in Japan and have Okada win in Japan. So yeah, I think that's very much a realistic possibility. As far as the letter grade goes, like, I'm going with a B+. I thought it was a very good show, although I might have liked last year's Forbidden Door better. I'm kind of torn. I forgot what letter grade I gave last year's show. But yeah, I think it was a very good show, but too long. And, I would have cut out like 3 matches from this show. They're trying to get everybody on the show. And I just don't think it was necessary. And I also think that the Bryan Okada match would have been stronger if the crowd wasn't so tired at the end. I do think the crowd makes a big difference. So anyways, B+, I definitely recommend checking it out, and absolutely check out the main event and the Ospreay and Omega match, which I definitely think was a match of the year contender. But I still think that MJF and Bryan Danielson is probably the AEW match of the year and a strong candidate for match of the year overall. Building Nexus sent in a $2 super chat. Says, not sure this Ospreay Callis alliance will last. Yeah, the thing is, Callis is basically feuding with Omega, and he's probably going to be involved in Blood and Guts. He's out there to make Omega's life a living hell, and Ospreay's probably going to go back to doing his own thing now, unless they do another match at All In. Michael Wayne says I gave last year's show an A. So there you go. That would mean that I definitely ranked last year's higher. And my gut feeling is that I liked last year's better from what I recall. Dwayne Atkinson sent in a $5 super chat. Thank you very much for that, Dwayne. Says, which would be better, Okada versus Bryan in a 2 out of 3 falls match or an Iron Man match? The thing about 2 out of 3 falls is that unless you go with the one guy wins 2 straight falls route, it's predictable because somebody's going to win 1 fall, somebody's going to win the second fall. I like the Iron Man match concept better because somebody could win like 3 in a row and then the other guy could win 2. You can do it in different ways. You can have a DQ, you can have a count out. You can have one guy get a DQ and then score a pin or 2 pins. There's just a lot more things you can do with an Iron Man match to keep it interesting. So I personally prefer the Iron Man matches over 2 out of 3 falls. Although Iron Man matches, unless you're doing 30 minutes, if it's 60 minutes, then you got to go really long. But those guys could definitely pull that off. So yeah, I would go Iron Man over 2 out of 3 falls for me personally. So thank you all so much for tuning in tonight. Much appreciation. Thank you for tuning in so late. I really do appreciate your viewership. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube. Tell a friend about the NoDQ.com YouTube channel and stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest wrestling news and rumors. Take care, everybody. Enjoy your week. I'll see you next time for the Raw recap. And remember, say yes to NoDQ.com. See you next time.